Hey friends, I'm Kristina Guerrero, former small-town girl with dreams of Hollywood and red carpets and a belief that I could make those dreams come true. So, I did. But life had more in store for me. From a drinking problem to getting sober, then a breast cancer diagnosis, and finding God, I discovered a strength in me I never knew I had. I wrote a memoir about my life she believed she could. So in each episode, I'm sharing one chapter from my story. From page to podcast, this is She Believed.
Microphone, check, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a working microphone that is connected. Praise Jesus, hallelujah. Hey everybody, welcome to She Believed. I'm your host, Kristina Guerrero. The reason I say that, guys, is because as you know, or may not know, I think it's pretty obvious. This is a DIY podcast. From top to bottom, Kristina's doing all of the things. Now, I do come from a production background, so I have a general idea of what makes a good show, right? But I've been lucky enough in my career that I have worked with some of the best in the business when it comes to lighting and when it comes to cameras and when it comes to audio. And when it comes to hair and makeup, if I'm being honest, but that's a different story. Anyway, all that to say is that I recorded my first 3 episodes solo and didn't realize that the microphone was not connected the entire time. I found out too late. Whatever. Has anybody mentioned that the audio was bad in episodes 1, 2, and 3? They have not. However, I care deeply. And so we have a microphone. This is microphone number 2. Hello, Mike. How are you? And I've got my nifty headphones, so I know that it's working. What's that? Houston, we have a problem? No, we don't have a problem because the mic is working? Okay, well, I guess we're ready for takeoff. Oh, goodness, guys. Welcome to episode 4 of my podcast, where I'm kind of taking you through the memoir that I've written on my life. Each episode is a different chapter, and today's chapter, well, I'm just going to be honest, it's going to be a tough one for me because the last one wasn't tough for me as well. Did you cry with me? I had to edit that thing, and I cried every single time I watched it. It just cuts still so close to the core, and I see how much pain is still there. And so, it's a process. It's a process. Now, if you didn't have a chance to watch or listen to the last one, it was called The Day I Stopped Drinking. And it's really about the initial punch to the gut, the come to Jesus moment, the Kristina, you have a drinking problem. It is time to get this thing under control episode. And my sobriety journey, I think, deserves a couple of episodes because it's so nuanced, because it's so complicated. And today's going to be if the last one was hard, this one's going to be pretty hard too. And the reason is because I'm talking about my most prized possession, my favorite people in the world, the most magical human beings ever to walk into my life. And that is my children, and who I was as a mother when I was at the height of my drinking problem, and what a drinking problem looks like when you have children. So let's start with an excerpt from my book. This chapter is called Mommy Needs a Drink. Parenting is hard enough, but let me throw some literal and metaphorical alcohol on the barely contained fire that is motherhood to create an unimaginable natural disaster. Oh, and parenting with a hangover is the worst. The poison from the alcohol running through my veins wreaked havoc on my nervous system. And the only thing that would level out my racing heart, my pounding head, and my shaky hands was another beer or 3 and Excedrin. I'd lay in bed with an ice-cold bag of frozen rice over my eyes to depuff my face, numb my throbbing headache, and wait for that morning's hair of the dog to kick in so I could sleep just a little bit longer. Mommy, can you play with me? No, baby. Mommy's not feeling good. We'll play later. Okay, Mommy, feel better. I struggled to even get my mind back to that time without my heart falling out of my chest and breaking into a million pieces. I let them down. I was supposed to protect them. Instead, I put them in harm's way every single time. What if they needed me? What if there was an accident? What if they needed to be rushed to the hospital? What if they had a bad dream? What if they were sick? There were so many nights I was utterly unable to care for them and just trusted that another less intoxicated adult would do it for me. Thinking back to that time, I'm most ashamed of who I was as a mother, my most prized possessions, and I was failing them. I would do anything to protect these two little boys, keep them from harm, and put their needs above mine, except, well, now, of course, I never thought that they were in competition with my drinking. I never thought, I choose alcohol over my kids. Sorry, kids, you lose. Whiskey wins. Better luck next time. They were obviously more important than booze, but the times in which I put my need to drink over their need to have a present mommy are far too many for me to bear. I'm heartbroken at all that I missed out on. The trip to the beach, fishing and exploring, I missed it. I missed the fireworks on the 4th of July. Thanksgiving dinner, missed it. Holidays, vacations, family dinners. It doesn't count if I was there in body, if I was entirely out of my mind. I was no good to them. Those moments are gone forever. I didn't experience it with them, and they didn't get to experience it with me. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Oh, two boys. When I say my heart falls out of my chest and is broken into a million pieces, when I think back to all of the times that my drinking problem got in the way of being the best mommy I could be for these two little boys who I love so much, but also who love me and who count on me to protect them. And I wasn't always that mommy. I wasn't always available to them in that way. And that sucks. And I'm working through that guilt still. Guilt does not serve anybody, right? But man, that one's a tough one for me. And I'm going to be honest. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to tell you about this. Like, when I think about sharing my sobriety journey with other people, I'm cool with you having an idea of what that looked like, right? Me painting a picture for you and you having an idea of what that looked like. I don't want my kids to be in that picture, right? It's easier to imagine that a drinking problem is just your problem, that there is no collateral damage, that there is no one else involved in what is happening. And certainly you don't want to think of two innocent little boys being kind of caught in the crossfire of all of it, right? And so I would rather not share this part. So much so that when I first wrote this chapter, I had no intention of sharing it with anybody. I had talked to a friend early on and she said, write down all of your deepest and darkest secrets, everything, write it all down. And then you can delete it later, but at least have like an idea of what the story is. Just get it all out there. And so as I was writing the story, I was like, great, this is the stuff I'm going to delete. This is the stuff I don't want anyone to know about. But I would be lying. I'd be lying to myself. I'd be lying to you. I'd be lying to my children. And also, I think that by omitting them, it minimizes the damage and the effect that alcohol addiction has on an entire family. And that's not fair. I've mentioned this already before. My dad was an alcoholic, and the effect that his alcoholism had on me and my siblings and my mom and my family are still affecting us to this day. And that's why it's so important for me to include this in the podcast. It's a reminder to me for accountability, but it's also perspective maybe for somebody else to recognize that the issues, that the things that you're going through don't just affect you, but they affect your family. Now, I think what's really interesting too is that my dad was an alcoholic. I saw what his alcoholism did to our family, and I didn't see myself in the same way, right? Like my drinking problem did not look like his drinking problem, right? I think that's super important is to define what we think of as a drinking problem or as an alcohol addiction or alcoholism for that matter, right? Like, what do we imagine that it looks like and what does it actually look like, right? Like in my mind, my dad was an alcoholic. He had a drinking problem. He lost his family. He couldn't hold a job. He didn't ever really have a home base. He didn't have a place to live. He lost everything. Well, that's not me, right? I'm highly successful. I have a family. I have a home. I have a job. I have a career. I show up for my kids. I go to church on Sundays. I mean, that doesn't look like a drinking problem to me. That looks like a very well-rounded person. But alcoholism and alcohol addiction and the drinking problem can look very different for different people. And so I think sometimes when we imagine, like for instance, I went to this Celebrate Recovery meeting, which is kind of like AA, but it's at churches and stuff. And I went to volunteer, and I was there with these women who had these heartbreaking, heartbreaking stories of living on the streets and being homeless and being addicted to meth. And I mean, losing their children and being disowned by their families. And I kind of was like, maybe I didn't have a problem. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. But there are varying degrees, right? There are varying degrees of what a drinking problem can look like or an addiction can look like. And maybe mine wasn't as severe, but mine was affecting my life and mine was affecting my children. And if I kept going down that same road, I was probably going to blow it all up. So let's just consider that a drinking problem looks different on different people. Now, another reason I share this story is because I know firsthand how isolating this feeling can be and how much shame is involved. And when there's shame and isolation, it's harder to reach out to people. It's harder to reach out to people for help or to admit to yourself that you need help. So it's actually kind of funny. When I was first getting sober, and let me tell you also that on that January 1st, when I stopped drinking, I didn't know that that was going to be my last drink. It took me a while to get there. I didn't know that that was going to be my last drink. But as I was first going through this, I would Google which celebrities are sober. It was so silly. But for some reason, knowing that other people had gone through this and had been so open about it, it was so helpful for me and also made me feel less alone. And so that's another reason why I share my story, because I feel like if you're hearing this and it resonates with you, then maybe you'll feel less alone. By the way, Dax Shepard, Robert Downey Jr., Ava Mendez, they're all sober. I would look at them, I'm like, well, they're sober and they seem to be having a good life. I couldn't imagine a good life not drinking. It really was that's where we were. I'm like, how could you possibly live fully and happily without alcohol? That's the lie. That's the lie. Okay, so like I said, I didn't do AA, right? But I would imagine that one of the 12 steps is accountability. So accountability is super big for me. I don't want to blame anybody. I'm sure that I did at the beginning because that's a defense mechanism, but I have worked really hard not to blame anybody for any decisions or choices that I have made. Now, with that being said, I would like to say that I very much was a product of the mommy wine culture. We're talking about kids. We're talking about drinking problems. We can't do that without talking about the mommy wine culture. Now, the mommy wine culture, as you probably know, is the idea that motherhood is hard, which it is. Motherhood is stressful, which it is. We're juggling a lot of things, which we are, and a glass of wine or a cocktail or a margarita or a mimosa can really help us get through the day, right? It normalizes drinking alcohol in order to get through the challenges of motherhood. And I was a card carrying member. I might as well have been the president of the Mommy Wine Drinkers Club. It was my thing. Now, no doubt I had a drinking problem beforehand, right? But certainly the stresses of motherhood and the fact that I was given permission to drink exacerbated my drinking problem, right? Mommyhood is hard. Mommy needs a drink. Mommy needs a drink. A couple years ago, I posted this picture on Instagram, and it was me in the garage, a very messy garage with a White Claw. And I said, Mommy just needs 5 minutes. I got so many comments on that picture. Like, yes, yes, yes. Applause, round of applause. Me too. So much so that I turned it into an Instagram live called Garage Mom, where once a week I invited other mommies to join me for happy hour, where we would hide from our children and drink alcohol. Like I said, I was a card carrying member, our PTA president of the Mommy Wine Club. And I bought into it. I had bought into the mommy wine culture so much that I couldn't parent without alcohol, right? I had soccer practice. I was packing White Claw in my backpack. Dinner every night, booze. Homework, booze. Every family function, booze. Every holiday, every dinner. I didn't drink every day. I didn't wake up, with the shakes. I didn't have withdrawals. I just couldn't. It's not that I couldn't function. I could function fine. I just didn't want to function without alcohol. That's what it comes down to. If I could do this sober, or I could do this with a couple of cocktails, literally everything. I went to Bible studies and I brought bottles of wine with me. I'm like, this is my kind of Bible study. All the while, I'm sure that they were like, let's pray for Kristina. She's a problem. She doesn't know it. The problem is for me, because I already had a drinking problem, I couldn't just have one glass of wine or one cocktail. It was like, I'm going to pour 2 White Claw into a glass with a double shot of vodka. And I'm going to have a couple of those. I'm going to have a glass of wine, and then I'm going to open a 3rd bottle. I'm going to go to a mommy play date, and I'm going to stay over because we shouldn't drink and drive. That's irresponsible. And since I'm not driving, should we open another bottle of wine? Sure. I don't know if that sounds familiar to you or not. The problem with the mommy wine culture is that the kids are there. They're not being taken care of completely. I mean, I'll just speak for myself. Okay. I'm not going to put that on anybody else. Accountability, right? My kids were there. My kids were taking care of themselves. My kids were watching me drink. And that breaks me. Man, that breaks me. Here's the thing. Mateo and Sebastian probably won't remember that. Thank God. Right? They had not gotten to a point where these are the memories that they're going to have with me. But if I didn't change, if I didn't do something, they were going to get there. Right? I was with a friend one time and it was a mommy play date and she'd had a lot to drink and she was passing out on the couch. And I saw her son look over at her, and her son was a little bit older, maybe 10, maybe 11 years old. And he looked just disappointed. He looked disappointed. And I saw that face. I saw that face and I recognized that he had seen that before and he was not happy about it. Now, I was right there. Don't get me wrong. I am not here to judge that mom, but it gave me a glimpse into the faces of our children when we choose to drink that way. When they get to a place where they are aware. Now, I was very aware of my dad's drinking problem at a very young age, right? Because he was mean. He wasn't funny or silly or whatever. He was mean. And it caused a lot of turmoil and fighting and yelling and scariness, unpredictability. But those kids know. The kids know. They know. They might not know why, but they know something's off. And for me, I think that's why it's so heartbreaking, because I remember little Kristina being scared. And I remember very much the unpredictability of my dad's mood and behavior when he was drinking. And those feelings are still incredibly triggering for me to this day. When I see people, now that I'm sober, if I see people drinking too much, I'm very uncomfortable. I'm very uncomfortable. I don't want to put my kids through that ever again. I don't want to ever put them in that position. It's not fair to them. And so for me, it's so important that from here on out, that my kids trust what they see, that there's no doubt in their mind that when mommy walks in the door after being out at dinner or being out or whatever, that they know exactly who's coming home to them. I want my kids to trust who they see, because I didn't trust my dad. Daddy issues, trust issues. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust him because I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what drinking guy he was going to be. And I don't want my kids to ever look at me and not trust what's happening. And that's what I find so fascinating about how I had a drinking problem, and how I thought I was so different than my dad. What's so crazy too is that I've seen firsthand how alcohol has ruined lives. Not just the person who has the problem, but everybody around them, right? There's always collateral damage. Marriages have been shattered. Relationships have been broken. Lifelong friendships have been torn apart because of alcohol, because of the choices that we make when we're drinking, choices that we would never make sober, choices that would be unfathomable and regrettable and I would never do that. Or I never meant to do that. And yet we still make room for it. And yet I still made room for it. Accountability. And so here's something else that is really important to me, and that is sharing my experience with my kids. Now, obviously, they're too young, but I have actually had age appropriate conversations with Mateo, who's 11, about why I don't drink. I just say mommy doesn't drink because I just couldn't be the best mommy I was for you. And he'll say something like, but so-and-so drinks. And I just say, every adult has to make that decision for themselves. But for me, it just doesn't work for me. But I will tell you a funny story. So I'm having this adult conversation, and out of nowhere, Mateo chimes in. He says, Mommy, is this when you used to be an alcoholic? Oh, I'm sorry, what? These are not words that I said age appropriate. This is not a word that I'm sharing with Mateo. And I was so dumbstruck by the whole situation. I was like, and there was the other adult there that was like, I'm like, oh my God, what does he know? What did he see? And I said, and I didn't want to lie to him, but I also had a feeling that his idea of what an alcoholic was not what an alcoholic is, right? And so I said, well, yeah, Mateo, it's just, yeah, it was when I used to drink, but no, mommy doesn't drink anymore. It was something like that. And then he just went on his little way. I was mortified. So the next day he's in bed and I go over to him and I said, hey, Mateo, what do you think an alcoholic is? And he said, is that somebody who drinks wine? Mateo, that's a really big word. And we don't want to use it if we don't know what it means. And we certainly don't want to use it around people that we don't know. Okay. So if you think maybe that somebody's mom drinks wine, let's not call them an alcoholic. It's just not a very nice thing to say. He's like, okay. So humbling to have children. But it's so important for me to share my experience because mainly I don't want them to think that alcohol is the answer to everything. I don't want them to think that alcohol is a rite of passage or that it's the only way to make friends or the only way to connect with people. It's the only way to manage stress. I don't want them to think it's the only way to relax. By the way, it's not. Alcohol is a depressant. So if you feel depressed after you've had alcohol, it's a depressant. I don't want them to use it as a crutch, and I want them to know the effects of what can happen when it gets out of hand and when it gets out of control. So that is why I share my story with them. And so what does my life look like now that I'm a sober mommy? Well, I will tell you that originally it was very isolating. I was very alone. I found that most of my friend groups, by no fault of their own, I mean, maybe I brought the drinking problem, but a lot of my social circles, booze was always involved. And so I found myself alone. I found myself isolated. I found myself extremely uncomfortable because I was trying to figure out who I was without alcohol, trying to get just comfortable around people. But the friends that I have, the people that I surround myself with now are people that I feel wholeheartedly myself with. I can be authentically me. I don't have to put on a show. I don't have to be anything that I'm not. I can feel comfortable in silence. And those are the people that are just so good for my soul, But it's gotten easier. It's definitely got easier. I will tell you, if you decide you're like, I think I'm going to get sober, or I think I'm going to quit drinking, there is light at the end of the tunnel. I promise you. I promise. You're like, how could you have fun without alcohol? I only say this because that's what I said. And I'll tell you, I have plenty of fun, but it's like the good feel. It's like the good stuff. It's real. It's real. It's not manufactured by any sort of alcohol. It's just good. It's just good. And being a present mommy, I thought I was the cool mom who drank. I'm a cool mom. I drink wine. The flip side of that is the cool mom that drinks wine just got wasted and passed out in front of her kids. Not saying that about anybody else. Accountability. The thing about being sober is that you feel all the feels, right? You feel all the stresses of motherhood. You feel overwhelmed. You feel like you can't do it. You feel like you're struggling and juggling and you're coming up short all the time. And you feel all those feels. No numbing those feelings anymore. But you also get to feel the good stuff. You also get to experience the good stuff. You don't miss the smiles. You don't miss that feel good, childlike love that you get from your children. You don't miss that. So yeah, you feel all of this other stuff. It's hard. Man, you feel all the good stuff, all the yummy stuff, all the stuff that you just one day wished you could have back even for just a second. And that makes it just so worth it. I'm a better mommy. I'm a better mommy for it. Gosh, did I give you some food for thought today? Was this a heavy one? I hope I'm not making anybody feel bad. Good grief. Go have your glass of wine if you need your glass of wine. I'm not here to judge you. That's the other thing. I will say sometimes I'll go out with people who know that I'm sober and they don't want to drink. I'm like, have a drink. I was the one with the problem. If you don't have a problem, hey, you got to ask yourself that question. Don't let it be me. So next week on the podcast, I talked about it a little today, and that is that the relationship that I have with alcohol started well before I could drink, right? It started when I was a little girl and my dad was a drinker, and how that affected me in my childhood, but also well into adulthood, how it affected me as a problem drinker myself, and how an understanding of maybe where he was coming from gave me an opportunity to forgive in a way that I never thought possible. So that is next week. Guys, thank you guys so much for joining me on this journey. I hope that maybe there's somebody out there who feels a little less alone, because knowing that you guys are walking on this journey with me with no judgment, right? No judgment. Don't judge me. Makes me feel a little less alone. So thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Hey, you're still here. Man, your dedication to get to the end, that's inspiring. I'd be so grateful if you hit that follow button and share this episode. And if you really loved it, hey, leave a review, because validation is my love language. Until next time, in the immortal words of Journey, don't stop believing.